Hello there, it's Matthew from matthewnorthmusic here. Thanks for watching my latest video. And as ever, if you like the kind of videos I make, be them about electronics, music, or whatever, then please hit the subscribe button. It really does help. And if you find any of my videos interesting, sharing them on social media is always really cool too. Now, today's video is something I didn't really want to think I'd need to have to make, but I kind of feel I ought to because I was there. So we're talking about The Who, one of my favourite live bands. I've seen them around about 20 times in the last 20 plus years. I've really enjoyed every show I've been to pretty much. I've also been fortunate enough to have met Pete Townshend, and a couple of years later I also got to meet his brother Simon Townshend at a different event. And I love The Who. I think they're just a fantastic live band. When I was a kid and I saw them at Live Aid, for me at the time, they were the band of the day for me. And then when they did their performance at the Royal Albert Hall for the BPI Awards, later to be called the Brit Awards, then that was, to me, I was absolutely hooked on being a Who fan from that point onwards. And actually, it's a little tease. This is the same amp that Pete Townshend used on that performance, and I'm going to be doing a video about that amp at some point in the future because it's something I've recently acquired. But that's not what I'm talking about today. What I'm talking about is what I observed at the Royal Albert Hall and what's been put in the press. Now, there's been loads of press stories about the departure of Zak Starkey from The Who. Now, Zack Starkey has been The Who's drummer for the last 29 years. He's also the son of Ringo Starr, and he was also bought his first drum kit by Keith Moon of The Who. Now, if you're the child of a famous person, then in many ways it's very difficult to get along, in so much as you're always looked upon as being, well, you're doing all right because you're the son or daughter of so-and-so. And I think to be really successful, you have to really go above and beyond in whatever you do to be taken seriously. Now, Jason Bonham is a very well regarded drummer, obviously son of John Bonham. Stella McCartney is a world renowned fashion designer. So, she had to work in her craft to get the recognition rather than, oh, you're just Paul McCartney's daughter. But Zak Starkey, to me, I consider one of the finest drummers that I've ever seen. I think the only drummer I've ever watched with my own eyes who I think is a better drummer was probably John Heisman. I thought Zak, every time I see Zak play, I think he's absolutely immense. Now, the last few years, Zak has been playing an electronic drum kit. Now, the reason he's been playing an electronic drum kit is to keep the volume levels quiet on the stage. Now, the Who have been touring with an orchestra for a few years. I saw them play a show down at the Eden Project in Cornwall. And Zak was playing the electronic drum kit then. And then the sound of the drums are fed through the monitoring system. Now, what a monitoring system is, for those that don't know, it's you either have loudspeakers dotted around the stage pointing at the musician who's performing, and they have what's called a monitor mix, where an engineer will put into the speaker what they want to hear. Now, if you don't use a monitoring speaker, use a thing called an in-ear monitor, which is basically, it's like a cross between a pair of headphones and a hearing aid. It's like a very small little earpieces that go in your ears. They go to a radio receiver on your back, and then that's transmitted from wherever the monitor engineer is. And you get a discrete mix of what you want to hear in your ears. And if you ever go to a concert and you see microphones on the stage pointing at the audience, this is so they can feed a bit of the audience sound into the in-ear monitoring system. Because the thing is, with those ear monitors in, you can't hear any outside noise at all. All you hear is what's being fed to your ears. Now, almost from the moment go at that gig, I'm talking about the second night of the Royal Albert Hall, which was the 30th of March, Roger and Pete were both having issues with what was being fed to them in their monitors. And there was one song where there was a discussion about the key of the song, because they started it and Roger certainly was not in the same key. And there was a few moments in some of the songs where Roger was singing in a completely different key to the actual song, and I can only put that down to him having either not the right stuff in his in-ear monitors or possibly nothing at all, and he was just going by muscle memory. So that was a problem. But there were other issues that were going on that night as well. I mean, Roger was having to deal with security guards in the audience because they were trying to stop people from dancing when they were stood up trying to have a good time. And Roger at one point shooed off one of the security guards, and then he had for a couple of minutes he had a conversation with another security guard while the band were playing. Now, on the stage, there were two monitor mix engineers. So there were two engineers, great big mixing desks in front of them, that were there to feed the audio information to the various people on the stage. Now, I don't know how it was deployed, whether there was one monitor engineer for some of the musicians and another monitor for the others. I'm guessing that's how it was done. But I gotta say, from where I was sat, and I was sat in the choir seat, which is basically, there's about 5 or 6 rows of seats behind the stage, and I was on the stage left, so I was actually right above where the monitor engineers were working. So I was actually having a look at what they were doing, because I'm always curious about things going on stage. And from there I could also see that Pete had an auto cue, and there was also a flashing light on the stage by Pete's foot, and that was a metronome there was about 4 songs: Barbara O'Reilly, Won't Get Fooled Again, Love Reign Over Me, Eminence Front, and You Better You Bet, that all had a backing track, which essentially just had either certain types of synthesizer sounds. You Better Bet's got a bit of acoustic guitar on it. And you see this light, these red and green light flashing, and that's just a metronome. And that's so that everyone can play in time. So they're in time to the backing track. Now, Zak the drummer would have probably also had a click in his in-ear monitors, like a metronome to play to. So obviously everything's in time then. Now, the issue, the incident that has been reported in the papers is that either Zak was playing too loud or too quiet, and that annoyed the rest of the band. Well, Zak was playing an electronic kit. Now, when you play an electronic kit, the actual acoustic sound from that drum kit is nothing. You can't hear anything. It's like tapping a table. That's all you hear. The sound of that kit is then fed into the PA system, and it's split between what goes out the front of house, the main sound, and what's fed to the monitors. And it would have been the monitoring engineer's job to have fed the sound to Roger's in-ear monitors. And as I said earlier, there was a moment there where neither were hearing the drums, and then there was a point where Roger was hearing too much drums and nothing else. That would have had nothing to do with Zak. I mean, even if Zak had turned up the output of his audio interface that had the drum sounds on, you'd have heard that go up in the overall sound of the room, and you didn't. So there was definitely some issues with the in-ears. And there was also a point where Roger said he couldn't hear anything at all in his in-ear monitors. So whether the radio receivers were not working properly, whether there was interference from something else, who knows. But it's also worth pointing out that Who didn't have that many rehearsals for these shows. I think from reading the stuff on the Who's website, because there's been like a little online blog on there, I think they only had maybe 2 or 3 rehearsals for those shows. It wasn't, like a couple of weeks of rehearsal. And the Who haven't played for a little while, so they were a little bit out of practice. And also, this was the first pair of gigs where they played as basically a 5-piece band, a 6-piece band. Or there was actually 7 members, because there was a backing singer there as well, who I didn't see for the whole show. But you had Zak on drums, you had John Button on bass, who's brilliant. They had a keyboard player, I can't remember his name. And then Simon Townsend, who was doing a lion's share of Pete's guitar work. Lot of acoustic stuff as well, and taking, you know, starting a lot of songs as well. And then you obviously had Zak, Pete, Rog, and had this backing singer as well. So there was no orchestra, there was no, like, you know, MD or whatever. It was just the band, and I like that, and I liked, you know, the raw sound. And you know, for me, it felt like an enjoyable gig, but you could tell there was technical issues. Now, was it, for me, losing Zak Starkey is losing a big part of that band, because he is just so good. And he knows the songs. He's been playing them for 29 years. He's a solid, reliable, great drummer. And, you know, if the official line is he was sacked because of that gig and because of sound levels, and that, to me, that's preposterous. I think there must possibly be something else going on that we don't know about, and I'm not going to speculate on that. But from a point of view of that gig, I don't think Zak did anything wrong on stage at all, other than playing his butt off for 2.5 hours, because, you know, the drummer is the powerhouse, the engine of the band. And I find Zak's playing faultless. I think he's absolutely brilliant. So it's a sad end to, you know, a great 20 odd years that I've been going to see The Who. I've enjoyed their shows so much, and it's going to be a real shame, because I don't know if they're going to get anyone as good as Zak. I really don't. And they're supposed to be doing some shows in Italy. Rumour has it they might do those shows acoustically, which means they might not have any drums at all. I mean, an acoustic Who gig would be great. I'd love to see an acoustic Who gig. But if that ends up being the last Who gig, I think that's very sad. I think it would be nice, if they're going to end, to maybe do like a 4 or 5 night run at the Albert Hall as a farewell show. And they could do, you know, a Quadrophenia show, a Tommy show, and then 2 shows of, you know, a mixed set or whatever. I think that would be good. And as long as they do, you know, a load of rehearsals before that, and they end like that, that would be great. But you just don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I was actually really surprised that they did these shows, because there's been so much talk about The Who not playing live anymore because of, you know, various health problems and whatnot. And yeah, for it to end on that gig, I think would be really sad. I think my hopes would be that this is just a miscommunication, that they all get back together and they all hatch a plan, and if they're going to end The Who, end it in style. That's what I'd like to see. Anyway, hope you found this video interesting. Please leave your comments on the subject below, and I'll catch you on the next one.